Are you tired of being the screen police? The constant negotiation, nagging, and fights over screen time? Girl, it's so exhausting. Two frustrated ADHD parents who experienced the problem firsthand have created a solution that actually works. Screen Coach is a time management app that rewards good habits. Kids can earn their screen time by doing activities set by you, chores, homework, even brushing their teeth. You can allocate times for kids to access certain apps only or block all apps. Once it's set up, you can relax. There's no sneaky workarounds. Endorsed by psychologists, Screen Coach enforces those routines that help ADHD kids and parents thrive. They offer a free 30-day trial, and because you're part of the Chaos Fam, you can even get a 5% discount after the trial. You can head to myscreencoach.com/chaos or click the link in the description and start building healthy habits for life. Parenting neurodivergent kiddos feels like trying to build IKEA furniture blindfolded sometimes. You know there's a manual, but it's all in Swedish. That's exactly why I want to spotlight Insight Family Market. They aren't another generic store. They're a curated marketplace built by someone who's literally been in the trenches as an educator and parent, selecting tools that actually make daily life more manageable for real families. From sensory-friendly clothing and adaptive tools to educational supports and wellness essentials, everything is chosen with a family-first mindset. No clinical jargon, no guessing what might help. What I love is that it's not about selling you a quick hack. It's about offering thoughtful, quality products that help create more calm, more confidence, and more actual functioning in chaos. If you are exhausted from chasing solutions and just want a place where the gear feels like it was picked by someone who gets it, Insight Family Market might be that stop on your journey. Today's episode is one of those conversations that might make you look at your kids' screen time and your own a little differently. Because here's the truth no one really wants to say out loud. We are not just handing our kids devices. We are handing them tools that were very intentionally designed to hold their attention. And if you're parenting a child with ADHD, a brain that already craves novelty, dopamine, and constant stimulation, we probably need to talk. Today, I'm joined by Dr. Jane Shawcroft, a researcher at Ohio State University who studies how digital media shapes children's development, behavior, and mental health. Her work doesn't just look at how much kids are on screens. It looks at how, why, and what happens next. She's been involved in research examining how early media habits, family rules, and even the design of the digital platforms we use can influence things like executive function, emotional regulation, and long-term media dependency. And yes, she's part of a larger conversation asking the question a lot of us are quietly wondering. Were these platforms built to hook our kids? In this episode, we're digging into what the research actually says, not the guilt, not the hot takes, not the just take the iPad away advice that falls apart by Tuesday afternoon. We're talking about how ADHD brains, real-life families, and what actually works when you're trying to raise a kid in a world that is constantly pulling for their attention. So, grab your emotional support coffee, because this one might change how you see screens in your home. Let's welcome Dr. Shawcroft to the mic. Welcome to Chaos and Caffeine, the ADHD parenting podcast where you do not need a degree to understand your kid. I'm Danielle, mom in the trenches who spent years obsessing over how to do this better, so you don't have to learn everything the hard way like I did. Each week, I bring on experts who actually make sense. And then if you want the real story, come hang out with me on Patreon where I break down how it all played out in my house. What worked, what flopped, and what I'm still side-eyeing. Thanks for being here. Dr. Shawcroft, welcome to Chaos and Caffeine.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here.
I am happy to have you for a couple of reasons. I will get into those later, but for those of my listeners that are brand new to you, do you mind telling us a little bit about you?
Yeah, so I am a assistant professor in the School of Communication at Ohio State University. And my research is all about how technology affects children and teenagers' social and emotional development. So I'm really interested in kind of like the family processes around technology and then how those family contexts and also like the design of technology and how all of that is kind of shaping, um, again, like social and emotional development for children and teenagers.
What I love about you most while reading up on you is that so I guess I should start with most people out there today are like, social media is bad. We should just tell our kids to stay off of it, but that is not feasible. But you actually have a completely different approach to all of this. You kind of
Yeah,
see it in a more positive light.
yeah, I think I would say that my perspective is more that there's the potential for a lot of positives. Um, I think our media for our kids isn't designed with healthy development in mind, but it could be. And so I think it's really important that we don't just like toss out all the potential good things, when really, if we were just more intentional, if there was maybe different regulation, or if we were required to design for the benefit of users and the benefit of children, I think we could see a lot of positives. And so some of the discourse of like we need to like get our kids off of everything, I don't think is helpful. I think we're kind of throwing out the baby with the bathwater when we do that.
Do you mind going over some of the positives that you mentioned or that you think could happen?
Yeah, so we know that media designed for educational purposes or designed to teach emotion regulation skills, shows like Daniel Tiger, or a lot of the things we see on PBS have positive benefits. Like they help children learn, they help children learn emotion regulation skills, they help them prepare for school. Media content doesn't have to be bad, it just has to be designed with intention. We know technology is really cool. It can like connect family members, right? So like having your kid FaceTime grandparents or extended family and cousins, is really beneficial for like facilitating those social relationships. And we know that parents are also really stressed and under a lot of pressure. And so technology, when it's set up and structured um, in the right way, and we'll talk about that later, I'm guessing, but can be really helpful for parents who have a lot of pressure and maybe not as much help as they should.
Can we dive into those right now?
Yeah. Yeah. So a lot of my research with younger kids is really focused on, again, like that family context around technology use. And so I always am trying in my work to be really mindful of like, why is it that parents are using technology? And parents use technology because they're stressed and because they have too much to do and not enough time to do it. And they're trying to like make a healthy meal and have a job and keep their house clean and also keep their kid alive. And they're just trying to do all of these things. And technology is a really good way to fill that gap that parents have. What I've found in my research is that technology is going to be the best when it is structured and intentional. So, what I mean by that, a lot of my work looks at a process of media use that we would call media motion regulation or regulatory media use. And basically, this is when we're using media and technology in a really reactive way with our kids. So, you're at the grocery store, or you're out in public, or you're at home, and your kid has like a temper tantrum and is just like falling apart and they're crying, and you're like, I want you to stop crying right now. Like, I can't deal with this. And so you like pull out your phone and you're like, watch this YouTube video. Works. It works so well. Like, children, they stop crying, they're like plugged in, everything's great. Like, it solves the problem so quickly. And that is one of the most consistently or that is a pattern of media use that's really consistently linked to developmental problems.
Mm.
And that's kind of a bummer because it feels effective. And so parents, like all parents do this a little bit. And a little bit, I don't think is the end of the world. But what you want to be careful of is this pattern of media use because you are instead of teaching children how to like work through an emotion and process it in a healthy way, you're kind of offloading that. And so what happens over time is kids need increasing amounts of technology to be okay and to be regulated. And children also really struggle to transition away from media use. And so what happens is you give them the iPad or the tablet or the show to calm them down, but you're just delaying the problem because when you turn it off, it's sort of like you just hit pause on the tantrum and you're just going to have to loop back to it again. And so what we see really consistently is kids who use media to calm themselves, to kind of deal with like boredom or to, again, manage emotions. They become a lot more reactive and a lot more dependent on media over time. And so, what I suggest and kind of what I see in my research and my read of a lot of people's research is that media and technology are super great when it's structured and when it's really intentional. So, what that looks like is like if every day you know, as a parent, you're like, I need 45 minutes to make dinner. And I need my kid to be distracted so I can make dinner and I can shower and I can like do a couple things. Having a set time where you're like at 5 o'clock, you get to watch 45 minutes of Bluey is fine. Like, I don't think there's a lot of evidence to say that's a problem. It's really structured. Kids know it's coming. There's set times and set boundaries around it and you're not using it in a really reactive way. And so structuring your child's media use is going to be fine. It's like, again, about like making sure that that media and technology use is really intentional and not reactive.
Noted. What about for my son is almost 11, and for the parents who have pretty much had unstructured time. I mean, he gets his phone at certain periods of the day, but that's not always consistent. So, like right after school, I feel like he needs it to just get online and become regulated. Maybe that's an ADHD thing. But for the parents who have been pretty much winging it with the older kids, do you have any suggestions?
Yeah, I think there's kind of this feeling that once it's like you've been more relaxed with your technology use, that like once you've done that, you can't pull back. And I don't think that's true. Like we don't think that way about parenting in other areas, right? It would be like if you gave your kid unhealthy food their whole life and then they turned 13 and you were like, we should do vegetables. Like we wouldn't tell parents like, oh no, it's too late, like chocolate cake for the rest of their life, the only option. I think what's really important with older kids when you're trying to change the rules is talking about why. Our preteens and our teens, like they can smell a hypocrite and and they're smart and they have autonomy and they're like becoming people. And we don't want to just impose rules on them that feel arbitrary or that we're not following. And so what we see being the most successful is when parents come to their kids and are like, hey, like I am really worried about technology and development. And I've noticed that I have a problem. And I think that like as a family, we need to use technology in a healthier way. Let's talk about like what that might look like. There's a lot of like books that you could read with your kid or like documentaries that you could watch as kind of a catalyst for we're coming at this together as partners and like we're all trying to be healthier. And that's where I think you can see success because like no kid is like, yeah, I don't want my brain to work well. Like that's not something that teenagers want.
Yeah.
And I think when you can come to your kid as like we're doing this together, I'm treating you like a partner. Let's talk about like what the pressures are and why this is hard, and let's like do this together is when you're going to be the most successful.
Any documentaries that you recommend?
Yeah, so documentaries are hard, and I will say that there's like The Social Dilemma is I think a good one. I don't know if I would necessarily say like, oh, they're 100% like solid, but they're good catalysts for conversations. There's a podcast that I really like called Screen Deep. It's run by Children in Screens, and they bring on like children in technology and media scientists and they talk to them about that. That can be a good thing to just be like, hey, we're all going to listen to this together and just talk about the science and talk about like, do we want to change any of our technology habits based on what they talked about? The Anxious Generation by Jonathan Haidt is a book that a lot of parents have read, and I know a lot of schools are starting to have teenagers read. I'm not, there's like some nuances in that book that I don't love, but I do think, again, like it's a really good catalyst for a conversation about using technology with intention and being really purposeful. And so I think pulling from any of those sources as, again, like this catalyst for conversation about changes you want to make, I think those are all going to be really good places to start.
I've been ADHD family, I think I would be better off with the documentaries unless I like try to sneak in a page every night, like right before bed when we're both calm and situated.
Yeah.
Before my brain runs away with me, other than stealing our ability to learn how to process our emotions, are screen stealing any other developmental milestones?
Yeah, I mean, I think one thing that's always important to think about is just time and what we're doing. So we call social media, and early social media was all about connecting us to our social network, right? Like my friends, early days of Facebook, were all people I actually knew in person and talked to, and it was a way for me to stay connected with my friends over Christmas break or to just like stay up on extended families' lives and just like friends from schools that I had maybe moved from. That's not social media anymore. And so I think it's really important to think about the kind of like social cost of our technology, particularly social media, but technology in general. We know that our teenagers are lonelier than they've ever been. Our adults are lonelier than they've ever been. We were really sold, again, technology is this way to make us not lonely, and that's not what's happened. Um, and we also know that humans are really social creatures, and development is really a social process. And so I think for me, the thing that I'm always thinking about is kind of what is the social cost and how do we use technology in a way that is socially helping us instead of stripping away, um, again, those positive social experiences and time.
Agreed. And I actually just listened to a podcast the other day where they basically said that social media was given to us, just like you said, to be this way to connect and have this social life. And then we found out, of course, that's not true in many aspects. And now the same creators of social media are creating AI chatbots to fill that void, which is insane.
Yeah, they created a problem and are now trying to sell us the solution to the problem that they made. And I think we need to think about that a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you recently did an article about that Hooked Kids social media trial. Do you have any thoughts for our audience about that? Anything that you uncovered there?
Yeah, so there are a lot of there's one big lawsuit going on about whether or not these large social media companies have like addicted and harmed minors. This is one of a large group of kind of, they're calling them like bellwether trials, where they're kind of trying out different legal arguments to see if they can get tech companies to be accountable for the effects, the negative effects in particular that they have on children and teenagers. These are really interesting trials because tech companies, particularly social media companies, have been pretty much untouchable up until now. And that's because we have something in the United States called Section 230. It's a law that was passed in the 90s to try and protect the internet and allow the internet to grow. And what it does is it makes it so that a company is not legally responsible for content that someone else puts on it. So like if I run a blog, I'm not legally responsible for something someone would post in the comment section of my blog. And like face value, that makes a lot of sense. But with social media in particular, they don't produce any of their content. And so there hasn't been a way to say like, hey, we think social media is maybe causing problems. And there hasn't been a way to get around this thorny issue of, is it the content that's causing a problem? And if it is the content that's causing a problem, like who's responsible for that? Like how would we have some sort of accountability? These lawsuits that are happening are really exciting and really interesting because they're trying a different approach where they're focusing instead of the content, they're focusing on the design. So there are a lot of ways that platforms and technology is designed that has nothing to do with the content. So for example, on YouTube, we have like automatic play where they're shortening the amount of time between videos to be as absolutely short as possible because it's a lot harder for me to turn off a video halfway through than it is for me to turn off a video in that space right in between. And we see this with like children are particularly vulnerable to this, right? Like if I can turn off a video right when it ends, kids will be like, all right, like it's over, like we can move on. But if it's halfway through an episode, like, no, like absolutely not. Like I am inviting a massive meltdown if I turn something off. And so they want to like shorten that period of easy to disengage as much as possible. So things like endless scroll also do that on social media platforms. There are a lot of design choices that are related to these harms that have nothing to do with the content. And these trials are kind of trying out to see if we can litigate around specific design features that are designed to maximize attention and therefore are related to some of those harms that we see in the literature. And I'm really excited about this because there's this movement right now to ban social media for kids under like 16, seems to be the common number. And I don't think the research supports that as actually helpful. I think we lose out on a lot of benefits. But if we could focus on design and say like, hey, you're not actually allowed to use design features that make it hard to disengage, that make it really easy to use technology in a really bad way. If we could regulate those design features instead, that would be amazingly beneficial for our kids, for teenagers, and also for adults. Like this would be a way and an approach to making social media healthy that would benefit all of us versus just like banning kids and then being like, oh, you're 16, like hope you can figure it out. Like that's not, I don't think we really have a lot of reason to think that that's going to work out.
If you are trying to pull your kids away from screens without triggering a full-blown household uprising, I have something that actually works in my house. My son and I are obsessed with the games from Taco Cat Games. We especially love their very popular Taco Cat Goat Cheese Pizza. I am not kidding when I say every family we've given it to comes back saying the same thing. This game is chaos in the best possible way. It's ridiculously easy to learn, the rounds are super fast, and within about 10 minutes, your living room turns into a laugh until you cannot breathe, slap the table competition. And for ADHD brains, it's perfect. Quick feedback, constant engagement, lots of movement, all the things that keep kids actually interested, which is exactly why I love it for our Screens campaign. Games like this create those tiny moments of connection that reset everyone's brain after a long day of school, homework, and way too much dang screen time. So if you're looking for a 10-minute family reset that actually works, check them out at tacocatgames.com or check them out in the show notes, because sometimes the best way to compete with screens is with doing something even more fun. Can we talk about the quiet gaps screens have created? Our kids can build entire digital worlds, but struggle to read the room in the real one. And no, this isn't about demonizing screens. They're not evil, but they are passive. Social skills, executive functioning, those are not passive. They're built, practiced, strengthened. That's why I love social thinking, because this isn't just be nice advice. It teaches kids how social communication actually works, how to notice what others are thinking, manage impulses, join conversations appropriately, and respond instead of react. And here's the part parents don't always realize. It also builds executive functioning, organization, flexible thinking, time management, problem solving. These are classroom survival skills, friendship skills, life skills. If screens have taken some of those practice reps, we can build them back intentionally. Check out social thinking in the show notes, and let's raise kids who can navigate people and not just platforms. So I have two questions from that. Do you have a thought on the age that it should be? And if they do ban it at 16, what do you think the younger kids would be missing out on?
Yeah, I think the age thing is hard. Like, I really don't think we have research to say at this age you're able to, like, you're not going to have a problem. There's a lot of adults who aren't using social media in a healthy way. And that's why I struggle with the age thing is there's not a study that I can really point to say like, oh, this is what they're basing these ages off of. We know that teenagers are more vulnerable to some of the problems of social media, but it's not everyone. And it's also not that you turn 16 or 17 and all of a sudden your brain's in a place where like you can navigate this because again, adults don't do it well. And so that's I think the issue with picking an age is it seems a little arbitrary in some ways. It seems just based on how grown up we think kids are at certain ages. I think the things that we miss out on or that teens would miss out on if we banned them, I think first off, again, there is this social aspect. Social media is meant to connect us. And I think when it's doing that, it works really well. And so I think kicking kids off doesn't help. I also think there's a really important aspect of the idea of banning kids from social media is kind of this effort to cocoon them and like protect them from the world, right? And social media is hard because it shows you the world in a way that's really hard, right? Like the news is difficult to read. It is hard to get on social media and see videos of war and violence and to see news about events that you find really distressing or upsetting. I don't know if it's what we want. If as a society, it's really in our best interest to not have our teenagers understand the world that they're becoming adults in, right? And I think that's something that I've been thinking about a lot, right? Is social media the problem, or is the world that we expect our teenagers to grow up and thrive in the problem? I had an experience that I've been thinking a lot about recently with my niece. She lives in an area that a couple years ago, this happened a couple years ago, but she lives in an area and there was a school shooting in her community. It like wasn't at her school, but it was really scary. And she got home. They had like a lockdown at her school. She was really anxious and stressed and worried and freaking out, which makes sense. And she got like her family tablet and had been like scrolling content about school shootings. And later, like at 2 a.m. that night, she like woke up my sister-in-law and was just like so stressed and like having this panic attack about school shootings. And people would take something like that and be like, oh, social media is the problem. I'm like, social media is not the problem. The problem is the fact that my 13-year-old niece has to go to school worried about whether or not there is going to be an active shooter at her school. And so I think we want to protect our kids from the world, but like that doesn't make the world better. And I think having informed teenagers who are becoming adults in our world who know what's going on, who understand the world that they're voting in and the world that they are engaged in is actually like in our best interest. And so again, if we could make the design good where it's maximizing that social aspect where it's helping us to be informed in a positive way, I think we could see a lot of benefits. And those are the things I think I'm most worried about losing.
So I think that platforms are starting to feel the pressure because only in the last 60 days or so have I seen targeted ads that are trying to convince parents that certain platforms have implemented the features to make them safer. And that is very recent to me to see those.
Yeah. Is it Instagram that has like teen accounts now that are more locked?
And TikTok, yeah.
Yeah, and TikTok does. And didn't TikTok have like a Super Bowl ad where they're like, look, you can learn math on TikTok? And I'm like, no one's learning math on TikTok, but all right. Whatever. Yeah, no, they're definitely feeling the pressure. I think in Australia they implemented their ban, and I think it was like 500,000 accounts were deactivated. Like that's a lot of money. I think Mark Zuckerberg a year or two ago when he was at the Senate, he estimated like they make $200 off a year off of kids under 13 on their platforms. You might want to fact check that stat, but I think that's like about the number. Companies make a lot of money off of kids being on social media, and it's in their best interest to keep them on. And I think what's challenging is that they make a lot of money off of these teen users, these younger users, because they have a harder time disengaging. Like the most profitable user for a social media platform is going to be the user who spends the most time on it, who has the most difficulty disengaging, who kind of has that more problematic relationship with social media because they're on it all the time. And that's what's hard is that the way that social media makes money, kind of that business model, is designed to incentivize companies to prioritize us using it in a bad way. And that's kind of where like rubber meets the road. The problem is that we haven't incentivized, again, like design choices that are going to help us.
From what you've seen on the ads or the account changes or settings that they put into place, do you think that it is even close to enough or a good start?
I think my issue with them is the messaging that I've seen the most of tends to be around like parent controls. And I think what tech companies really, really want is us to buy into this idea that making social media healthy and safe for kids and teens is a parent's responsibility. And I think that is really good misdirection on their part because, again, like parents don't have the time to do that. And when we do that, we pit parents against these massive tech companies with so much money and so many resources. And it's like this daily David and Goliath battle. But like, do we actually think that is gonna work? Like, do parents honestly have the time and capacity to be constantly on top of this, right? With every new update of Instagram, do we really expect parents to go in and figure out all the settings that they kind of make convoluted? Like, yes, they're like, oh, they're there, and that's super great. They're hard to set up. It's like they're not trying to make it easy. They're trying to make parents feel bad. And they're trying to make it seem like this is parents' job and it shouldn't be parents' job. Because when a problem is so widespread and so systematic, that means it's not an individual family problem, it's a societal problem. And when it's a societal problem, it needs a societal solution. And that would be regulation and accountability.
That is so good. I love that. I need to remember that because I think that these giant corporations have a way of turning things and spinning things in their favor. And I had not even considered that they were doing that in this moment and trying to say, oh, well, you have this ability to do that, and you're the one that's not been doing it.
Yeah, they're trying to make this parents' problem. And parents for sure should be engaged and aware of what their kids are doing, and parents need to be involved. And most parents are trying. I saw an article when Mark Zuckerberg was testifying, and again, this big lawsuit that's happening right now. And the headline was like, Mark Zuckerberg isn't your kid's dad. And I'm like, of course he's not, but he is the person who is in charge of this giant part of our entire world who has an immense amount of power in our individual lives. Like, I don't want him to be my child's father, but what I want him to do is to have accountability for the choices he makes in our product, right? Like no one would say like, oh, no one would say like, oh, it's a car company. It's a parent's responsibility to make sure the car that their kid is driving is safe. Like, no, like that's Honda's job. We seem to think that because social media is a free service and that a lot of our technology and our media is free, that that means there isn't it's not a product and there's not some sort of responsibility that should be there on the part of the company.
That is so good. So I'll be honest with you. I had so many questions around ADHD and screens that I wanted to ask you, but in our pre-interview email, you said something that is so important that I feel like we should focus on that. And that is that for whatever reason, a lot of parents have the narrative that screens are giving our kids ADHD. And you said that's not true. And I would love for you to dive into why that is for parents that are listening.
Yeah, I'm super glad you brought this up. So this is the most common thing. I'll just like meet people like in places and they'll be like, what do you do? And I'm like, oh, I'm a scientist. I study technology and child development. And people will be like, I gave my kid ADHD by letting them watch SpongeBob. I feel so bad about it every day. And I'm like, whoa, like, this is this like super common narrative we have. And I think there are some early studies that there's research that shows a relationship between certain media habits and ADHD. What is really important is that it's like symptoms of ADHD. So you could use technology in a way that might make ADHD harder to manage or more difficult. You are not giving your kid ADHD by letting them watch anything. You might be making it harder for you as a parent, but you're not causing your child to have ADHD. And I think this is, again, like this really harmful narrative that we have because like that's a lot of guilt for a parent to carry around. Parents have a lot of things that they maybe could feel guilty about that it might be productive. This is not one of them. It's like this is not a thing that we need parents to be carrying. We want families to use technology in as healthy ways they possibly can. But if your kid has ADHD, it's not because you let them watch SpongeBob one time.
Do you think it's because somewhere out there on the internet land, one person said, "Oh my God, screens gave my kid ADHD," and people ran with it? Or is there actually some type of information or research behind it?
Again, yeah, so there is some research that would back this conclusion. And what happened was there was this conflation between causing ADHD and making symptoms of ADHD more like prominent or salient, right? And there's a difference between those two things, right? Someone can have ADHD and be managing it really well, and that's going to look a lot different than someone who's not. Technology makes it harder to manage ADHD in a way that's healthy. And so depending on how you're using it. And so a lot of times early on, like very early on in this research, there was a conflation between symptoms and like actually causing ADHD.
Gotcha.
And I think because there was some early research that was making that was kind of conflating those two, that's where we get this narrative.
I mean, technically, we probably did give our kids ADHD, but more so like genetically, not technology. You know.
Well, I was gonna say there is a lot of research about a genetic component with ADHD and it's not something to feel guilty about. Like it's like, yeah,
Yeah,
they're gonna be like you. Like that's not, I don't know, like I think that's a fundamentally different thing than like I as a parent made a choice to
yeah,
and that gave my kid ADHD. That's a lot different than being like, they're my kid. And that's what that's gonna be.
yeah. My poor kid did not stand a chance. My mom and dad have ADHD, and then me and his dad have ADHD. So he was like, not a chance of getting by with anything. But so two of the symptoms that come to mind with technology making them worse is definitely transitions off of screens. I can see major meltdown there. And then also I think the constant refreshing of something new every few seconds is focus wise. But what other symptoms could technology be exacerbating?
Yeah, so those are the main ones that you hit. And this is why content is really, really important. So I research really consistently. Like I would always recommend you want slower, calmer content, especially with little kids. So like anything on PBS, like open the PBS app and just be like, here's the remote. You can pick anything to watch on here. Like PBS is phenomenal. It's all designed and like science backed and it's slow and it's like trying to teach your kids things like ABCs, but also teach emotion regulation. And it's trying to be slow and it's not having those constant cuts and it's not bright, flashy colors because the content and that attention shifting is one of like the biggest things that we see with technology. So like YouTube is going to be a problem because we know that YouTube is not designed with science and healthy development. It's most YouTube stuff for kids is designed to have them watch it and be engaged. And so we see a lot of really bright colors, a lot of shifts and cuts, a lot of like weird people waving their arms around and like stuff like that. Um, a huge part of the conversation around ADHD and technology is going to be the content. And you want really high, you always want, regardless, you always want really good, high quality content. Kids with ADHD, especially, like you want content that is slow, that is gentle. PBS is perfect.
One of my very first interviews on the podcast was a dad who has a kiddo with ADHD and autism. And I remember this so clearly because it was very jarring to how I was letting my kid use his tablet. And he says, in that 45 minutes of where I'm cooking dinner or I'm taking a shower and he has his screen time, when I walk back into the room, I say, "Hey, buddy, what did you learn?" So most of the time for his kid, that was baseball. So I'm trying to like implement that. My son's thing is basketball. He wants to be a higher vertical jumper. I'm not even sure I know what all that means in basketball land. But like, what did you learn? I think that's a really good reframe for me and possibly a lot of other parents out there whose kids are watching a new video every 30 seconds.
Yeah. I like that. I like too the idea that that conveys that you have an expectation of intention with your kid, right? Like if that's always your habit, your kid knows that after 45 minutes, dad's going to come in and be like, "What'd you learn?" and
Yeah.
I like that a lot.
I had so many other questions, but I think that that's so good so far. It's to me, I mean, honestly, technology is a struggle for every parent. But for our kiddos, it seems so much more important, to know what's happening in their little brain. And like I told you in the beginning of the interview, my son, I feel like he just needs like 15 minutes of wind down time. And I guess that's some type of emotional regulation or coming back online or nervous system regulation, even. And then he emerges after a few minutes and he's a totally different person. But it's just very challenging in 2026.
It is. Again,
Yeah.
that pattern of like you get home from school, you have 15, 20 minutes, like that is a structured time. Like that's going to be fine because
Yeah.
it's something that's like built into a routine. It's not reactive. There's a purpose for it. Um, there's an end to it. And yeah, you want like my message is always just like technology needs to be intentional. And when it's intentional, it's almost always a lot healthier than when it's not. Um,
Yeah.
and that's the hard thing is technology is really easy to be unintentional with it. But if we can be intentional, it's a lot easier to kind of let go of the stress of like, is this a problem? And it's like, well, this is a choice. And when it's a choice, like it's naturally going to be a lot healthier. And so,
Yeah.
yeah.
I am very fortunate in that my kid is hyperactive. So if I say, hey, let's go play basketball or soccer, or let's do something together, like we have a gaming system downstairs, like an arcade type thing where we do the two-player. But even that is to me more like bonding time than him just sitting there swiping. And if I come in and interrupt his screen time, he is more than likely to say, sure, let's go burn some energy off or do anything like that. But I know a lot of parents do not have that same situation.
Yeah, that's hard. I like though that you bring up like games and how games can be social. I think there's a lot of stigma around like video games because it's like technology. But like if you're doing it as a family, you're doing it with your kid, there's a lot of research to say that's really good for your relationship. And again, when technology is social, we're not seeing the same types of problems. The example I always think about with that is my brother during COVID was fine. And he was fine because he played Fortnite all day, but he was just with his friends and they just chatted. And so we were all super lonely and having a hard time and going crazy. And after a week, having to like panic reach out to our friends and be like, I need to talk to someone right now. And he was fine. Like he was good. He just got to hang out with his friends all day. And I think we need to remember that like games can be social and we want games to be social and working to make games more social is another good example of technology being a positive in our lives.
So, what I'm hearing is that I should not feel guilty for the extra time I give him during online social gaming. Because when his friends are online, I give him a slightly longer pass than I normally would, because that seems like fun social time for him.
Yeah. I think if you wouldn't feel bad about like his friends being at your house talking for that amount of time, then like there's not a reason to feel bad about him talking to his friends while playing a game with them. Um,
Got you.
I would let that guilt go.
Yeah. I kind of, he probably guilts me into a lot of it anyway because he's an only child. So he's like, Mom, my friends are on. So I'm like, oh, okay, but
Again, though, like I think so much of like we were just sold technology as this way to connect with people. When it does that, I think we see way fewer problems. And research would tell us we see way fewer problems. And so I think being able to reclaim technology as not this thing that we do where we sit in bed and we doom scroll, but instead it's a way to connect us to other people. I think is making technology what it's actually supposed to be.
Dr. Shawcroft, this has been amazing. I would selfishly talk to you all day and pick your brain for hours, but I know you have a lot more important things to do. Do you mind telling our listeners about your website where they can learn a little bit more about your research?
Yeah, so I'm part of a group at OSU. We're called like Media Cross Development Research Group. It's a group of researchers who study effects of media technology across the entire lifespan. And we have a website. It's just osu-mediadev.com. And that's a place where we put updates on our research. We have links to a lot of different resources that, as scientists, we feel like are really good and really high quality for parents. It also has like everyone's contact information there. It's a good place to go to kind of find more information and more resources if you want.
Perfect. And of course, I will link that in the show notes. I know ADHD brains cannot remember that on the fly. Dr. Shawcroft, do you have any parting advice that you would like to leave to our listeners who are in particular dealing with screens possibly?
Yeah, I think for parents in particular, one thing that I always like to tell parents is that one of the best predictors we have about the relationship your kid is going to have with technology is the relationship you have with technology. And so sometimes if you feel like your kid's screen time is out of control or it's not what you want it to be, but you're having a hard time making those changes, a really good place to start is just with your own technology use. And sometimes that can feel like an easier, more approachable start. I also just want to end with, if you are worried about this and trying to do something about it, you're already going to be in a better place. So many parents are so worried and so stressed about this issue, and that worry and that stress is an indicator that you care. And if you care about this, like you're more likely to be making better choices. And so there's a lot of guilt, and I think we need to, I don't know, there's things that are worth feeling guilty about, and there's things that aren't. And I think a lot of parents could do with a little bit less guilt in this area.
I'm going to have you back on one day to go over those things that we might want to feel guilty about. But for today, this has been amazing. Thank you so much for your time.
Yeah, of course. Thanks for having me.
So here's what I keep coming back to after this conversation. This isn't about good parents and bad parents. This isn't even about willpower. And it's definitely not about just ripping the tablet out of your kids' hands and calling it a day. We are raising kids, many of them with ADHD brains, in a world that is literally engineered to pull their attention, hijack their focus, and keep them coming back for more. That is not a parenting failure. That's the environment. But we are not powerless. What does matter? The small shifts, the structure, the conversations, the moments of connection that remind our kids there's a whole world outside the screen. And that we're in it with them. Not perfectly, not consistently, but intentionally. If this episode hit you in the chest a little, girl, same. You are not behind. You are not failing. You're parenting in hard mode. And you're still here. And that counts for every dang thing. If you found this episode helpful, share it with another parent who's deep in the screen time trenches right now. And if you'd like to read a little bit more about Dr. Shawcroft's work, be sure to check her out in the show notes. And if you want to hear how this episode played out in my home, as always, join us over on Patreon. All right, go drink your coffee before it gets cold. I know you need it after this one. And I'll see you guys back here next week on Chaos and Caffeine. If you're a parent in the neurodivergent world, you already know this. We read labels like it's our second job. We side-eye ingredients, we Google brands at midnight, and we're constantly looking for support options that feel intentional and not sketchy. That's one of the reasons so many families, including my own, trust Mary Ruth Organics. Their supplements come in easy-to-take liquid drops, which honestly matters when pills are a hard no. The flavors are kid-friendly, the formulas are vegan, Clean Label Project certified, and the company itself is a B Corp, which means they actually care about what goes into their products and how they operate. Mary Ruth's doesn't promise miracles, and neither do we, What they offer is thoughtfully made, high-quality supplements that fit into real family routines without added stress. If you're looking for a brand that prioritizes transparency, clean ingredients, and making supplements easier for kids and parents alike, Mary Ruth Organics is one worth checking out. Because supporting our kids starts with choosing products we actually feel good about giving them.